In a world where it's becoming easier and easier to generate sound and video and images, I think we should all be very afraid of that power in the hands of the police, who also have a certain power to declare what's a crime and who's guilty of a crime, and also they have very sophisticated forensic resources to manipulate video and to make it extremely hard for ordinary people to know what is true and what isn't.
Really great to see you all here. The struggle continues, despite it being less often in the media, and despite our lovely Projet Montreal government blocking our event permits. It tells you a little something about our government that during election season they don't even want to have this discussion happening, you know? Because it's a threat to them, and it should be. They're the enemy. So my name's Ted, and I have the great honor to introduce our two panelists today in a panel/workshop about police body cameras. And so I'll introduce both of them. Alec Karakatsanis, sitting directly to my right, is the founder and executive director of Civil Rights Corps, a US-based nonprofit that challenges systemic injustice in the US legal system. In this role, he has pioneered many constitutional civil cases that challenge the size, power, profit, and everyday brutality of the punishment bureaucracy in the United States. He's the author of 3 books, and I'll just mention 2 of them. One is Le Caméra d'Intervention, which in today's the Montreal launch for this book. It's available from Édition Rue d'Orléans. Claude is selling copies back there. A really, really helpful book to combat some of the myths around police body cameras. And the second is Propaganda, How the Police and Media Manipulate Our News, which is also available at the table out back, and we had the Montreal launch for it yesterday. I think some of you know Alec from Twitter and Blue Sky, where he just does incredible, really important takedowns of the bullshit that is said about police and crime. Which I find very informative, and also, as I said in an event yesterday, helps me to not feel like I'm the only person who's getting frustrated by the nonsense that is said in La Presse, the Gazette. I'm not even talking about Journal de Montréal, which is obviously bullshit. And then to the right of Alec is Ricardo Lamour. Ricardo is many things. He is a musician, records under the name Cal. He is sometimes an actor. He is a community organizer, especially in the struggle against police violence and police killings, going all the way back to the killing of Freddy Villanueva in 2008, and continuing right through the latest atrocity, which was the police killing of Abisai Cruz in Saint Michel earlier this spring. He is also a writer. You can find his work most recently on Pivot, Pivot.Québec, where he writes a regular column, which is really helpful. Author of a really great report on anti-Black racism in Quebec, which was submitted to the United Nations. And so we're really lucky to have both of them here today. So give them a round of applause. And so like I said, the panel is about police body cameras, and I think we're all probably wading into this discussion with different levels of knowledge. And so my first question is to Alec, and it's just, what is a body camera? technically speaking? And what other kinds of technologies is it connected to such that it becomes useful for whatever purpose it is used for?
Thank you, Ted. And thank you so much for coming and being here, for letting someone from the United States here, even though our country is such a terrible place right now. It's been wonderful to be here in Montreal the last few days. I've never been here before. I feel so welcome. I've met so many incredible people. We had the chance to meet and hang out the last couple of days, and I feel wonderful being here. And I hope the work that we've been doing, suing judges and prosecutors and police and jails and prisons and courts in the United States, and then thinking about the propaganda kind of reactions to our work is useful to you. And I'm so grateful to Claude and René for translating some of that. Translating some of that work. And I really hope it's useful, and I hope it's the start of some more collaboration, so that many of the mistakes that we've committed in the United States, in terms of the liberal institutions, the Democratic Party, the universities, the NGOs and nonprofits, who have sort of paved the way for the rise of fascism in the United States by accepting and adopting a lot of the mythologies and policies and technologies of authoritarianism. Hopefully we can work together to prevent the sort of full-scale adoption of these in other societies around the world. I think the United States is a little bit further along in its path, and some of this, particularly some of the police technology, although I've learned the last few days that you all are catching up very quickly. When we say the word body camera in the United States, what we're really referring to is any recording device that is typically affixed to the chest of the police officer that is designed to record interactions that the police may have. Now, we'll get in a little bit maybe, a very important feature of this, of course, is that it's a tool of surveillance that the police decide which interactions are recorded and which interactions are not recorded, right? And how they're edited, and very importantly from a propaganda perspective, when they are released to the public, because the police understand that and we'll talk more about this later, but the camera enables the police to control the virality of a particular moment. That is to say, if they want an incident to be out in the press really quickly, they can get it out in the press really quickly with images, and if they want to stop an incident from going viral, they can withhold the video. And then it's connected to an array of sort of sprawling technology services and products. So the body camera is now connected to facial recognition software. It's connected to voice recognition software and other kinds of pattern recognition software. It's part of huge, extremely lucrative cloud computing, storage, and maintenance contracts. Companies like Axon, which I talk about in the book, which used to be called Taser. They rebranded after their products were getting less and less popular because they were killing people. And now it's worth tens of billions of dollars more. Microsoft, Amazon, these companies are making a tremendous amount of money from the hosting of the body cams, and then other forms of artificial intelligence software that process and scan through all of this data, because the police are now in possession of more data than ever before. And then these are all connected to big platforms that the police use that are called predictive policing platforms, which the police say supposedly help them decide which neighborhoods to go into, which people to target for which crimes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the camera itself is actually a very small part of the multi-billion-dollar surveillance industry. Most of the money is actually being made on subsequent contracts for artificial intelligence, service, maintenance, software updating, et cetera, et cetera.
Thanks so much, Alec. Just a second question then to Alec. Many of us, if we've heard about body cameras, we've heard about them as a possible police reform, something that can reduce police racial profiling or police killings or hold police accountable. And one of the things that I found really important in your book is you talk about, the original purposes of body cameras when they were first put on the market, and then you're also, so maybe you can talk about like what the original purpose of them was, and then how it came to be that they're being marketed as the sort of solution to police racism and violence today.
I think that the police body camera is one of the most significant achievements of carceral propaganda in modern history. And actually that's why I started writing about it. I've been thinking very deeply about propaganda. As I talked about yesterday in the event, I've become kind of obsessed with how the punishment bureaucracy and the industries that profit from it have gotten so many ordinary people. In the US we might call them well-meaning liberals, or as I call them, low information liberals. How so many people who at least say, and in many cases believe, that they want a society with less violence and less police violence, less government repression, more equality and flourishing for all human beings and living creatures, how those people have been brought over to support projects of incredible state repression and violence and brutality and racism. How did that happen? What are the mythologies that are being cultivated in our society? And the body camera is really the perfect example of that. So in the book that I wrote, I studied 10 years of body camera propaganda. And in the United States, there was not a single article in the last 10 years before the book's publication that accurately told people the history of the police body camera. The history has been erased, so now when every single article, even the articles that correctly point out that body cameras do nothing to reduce the violence and brutality and sort of illegal police misconduct, we know that. That's a scientific fact now. It's been studied and studied. Even the federal government in the United States has come out and said body cameras do not make the police less violent and they do not make them follow the law. So we know that. Even the articles that accurately report that, they still frame the body camera as a good faith intervention for police reform. So they say something like, oh, well, it was this well-intentioned reform, and it turns out it actually hasn't, what can we do? It hasn't, they erase the true story of the body camera, which I think is quite important. So about 15 years ago, when the body camera was first starting to get some traction, the police surveillance industry went on a huge marketing spree within the police community itself. And they got a bunch of police chiefs together, and they sort of decided with the highest ranking people in the police industry that this was going to be a really important product for them. Particularly important also was the support of prosecutors, which I'll get to in a minute. There was initially some resistance from the frontline officer, who was very concerned that the body camera might enable the police superiors to monitor their own behavior a little bit more, right? They eventually were able to overcome that, and it became sort of a consensus view in the policing bureaucracy that, with some exceptions, that we really, really want these body cameras. But they had a problem. They couldn't get the government in the United States at the local level across the country and at the federal level to spend the billions of dollars it would take to give every police in the country a mobile surveillance camera that the police controlled. So they were so desperate for these cameras that they started privately funding them for the police. So Steven Spielberg, the famous director, gave money to the police foundations to fund body cameras for police. They raised money among some of the richest people in the United States to privately donate. In the United States, we have private police foundations because the police don't get enough government funding. And so oftentimes a lot of weaponry and surveillance technology that they don't want to purchase through official government channels is purchased through privatized police foundations. So they were so desperate, but they weren't able to get most police departments to get these cameras. So in 2014, there was the police killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson. And I personally have done a lot of work in Ferguson, sued the city of Ferguson, And so that's something we can talk about if people are interested. But the important point for the purpose of this discussion is that it was an incredible opportunity for the police surveillance industry because there was no video. There was no bystander recording the killing like there was with George Floyd or Eric Garner or many other killings where bystanders had videotaped what the police officer was doing. And so there was this frustration in the public about what happened. And people obviously wanted to know what happened to Michael Brown. The police surveillance industry completely pivoted their strategy. They decided, you know what? Instead of pitching this as something that the police want, that's really good for police and prosecutors, we can pitch the body camera as a tool of police reform to curb police violence. They got Barack Obama on board and he proposed several $100 million, and then they got Democratic Party officials across the country in city councils and county councils and state legislatures, and they funded the greatest expansion of police surveillance technology in modern history. And they really wanted, there was really four main things that they wanted from this. Number one, they wanted to give police and prosecutors a tool to collect evidence against the poorest people in our society. So now if you look at the actual data, these body cameras are used every single day. Hundreds of thousands of cases across the country to prosecute unhoused people. You know, the camera catches them trespassing or possessing some plant that's on a list of plants that the government says you can't possess, against sex workers, against people who the police accuse of disorderly conduct or shoplifting. It creates a video evidence that is very powerful. It gives prosecutors more leverage to use against people to coerce them to plead guilty more quickly. What you have to understand is this is very important in the United States because we arrest over 10 million people a year. It's impossible in the United States to process this many people through a legal system that technically gives you the right to a lawyer, to investigate your case, to file motions, have a jury trial. We could not convene 10 million juries. So we have to, the story of the punishment bureaucracy over the last half century in the United States is the story of finding ways to make it more efficient. The number one thing the body camera does is it gives police and prosecutors a chance to, whenever they want to turn on the camera, they can now use it against people for low-level offenses, and they can use it to get them to plead guilty really quickly, and it increases their leverage to get a harsher punishment. Secondly, they wanted them to use in protests. Now it's possible for police to come to any protest and just turn and scan the crowd, and now they have a recording of all the faces. They can then analyze that with facial and voice recognition software, and they can see who is next to who knows who's leading the protest, and then they have an archive of all this stuff that they can search across different protests and across different actions and even across different cities, so they can track people's movements. So the third thing that they wanted to do was give police a way to avoid certain kinds of civil liability. The idea is that this will give officers a way to complicate the narrative by controlling when they turn it on and when they don't. And of course, the camera is on the chest, usually of the officer. So if you notice, movies are not filmed like that. Movies are filmed like this, very steady. The chest makes it seem more frantic. And it helps the police in any situation justify the narrative that it was a fast-moving thing and I had to shoot or I had to do this because it was. So they like that, and also the angle looks away from the officer. So it doesn't capture what the officer is doing, it captures what the officer wants it to capture. And so in the United States, the police are trained as the officers are doing this, all off camera, they always say things like, stop resisting, stop resisting, stop resisting, right? So it enables them to create a different kind of image, and as James Baldwin wrote, the camera is the language of our dreams. It tells the story that the person who possesses the camera tells us. And then finally, and I think this is an underappreciated point, as I mentioned earlier, it enables police to control the narrative much more easily. Because if there's an incident that happens that involves an undocumented person, right? The police can now choose among thousands of videos, like let's say in New York City, they can find one that fits the kind of right-wing narrative they want to promote in the news. Anytime they want, they can release a video on any day, and they can create viral news stories throughout the right-wing press and then into the mainstream press of, look at this video of this undocumented person hitting a police officer, or, doing this other thing, or an unhoused person, or whatever it is. So they can it gives them an extra tool to essentially anytime they want, they can create viral video stories throughout social media and the news, because they have so much more content now. And they have hundreds of officers in each city that are constantly deciding what and when to film, so they can curate selectively the kinds of stories that we're told about the most vulnerable people in our society. At the same time, when the cameras capture something that they may not really want, they can bury it. They can either not turn their camera on, or they can withhold it. So for example, when the Chicago police killed black teenager Laquan McDonald, the police's own cameras captured the murder, and they withheld it for many, many years until a court forced it. By that time, the energy and the virality of that moment, which could have been another George Floyd moment, for example, had died down. And the police understand the sort of rhythm and virality of news. It's a big part of propaganda, is actually when, and then also the police edit these videos. So by the time it's released to the public, it's often made a little blurry, or there's narration, or a little, they can highlight a portion of it and point you in some direction. They can edit it like they're a director of a film. So I think those are some of the real purposes, and that's actually how they've played out.
Amazing. I'll give you a second to digest that. Okay. So Ricardo, you've been involved in the struggle against police violence, police killings, going back to Freddy Villanueva. Since the killing of Freddy Villanueva, we've had a whole long series of police killings in Montreal, many of which have been filmed. So we have video footage of the police killing Alain Magloire, Nicholas Gibbs, Pierre Coriolan, and now footage of the police killing Abisai Cruz. So I wonder if you could talk about some of these cases. Were there any consequences for the police? And in those cases where we had video evidence, did that help? Did it result in justice for the people who were killed and their families?
Well, thank you, Ted. My simple answer is no. Yeah, but I want to do many things at the same time. So we don't, Montreal has not accepted to go forward with body cameras, but I've tried a pilot project, and with the new potential administration, for sure they would go forward. Many cities have said yes to it. The RCMP, the federal police, are now implementing it on a national scale. But you've articulated with very great precision what is a body camera. On the physical form, I'd like to distribute this body camera so that you see what it is, what it looks like, and then the people in the back, you can just give it to Claude. Claude will give that to me, because I do have a youth project with 5 black boys, and at some point I also had my own obsession, so I wanted to get my own body camera. So yeah, whatever. So, but to answer your question, let me just say 2 things. I want to thank this space for having us today. But I also want to reflect about us being here for 3 reasons. If we think about what we've experienced during the pandemic, what the Chinatown has experienced during the pandemic, and also in 2022, a Chinese man by the name of Ronnie K lost his life in Ile des Sœurs. He used to work at Desjardins, worked remotely from home, was very involved in his community, was involved with Chinatown. And we marched from the square where we were supposed to have what we're doing right now to City Hall to ask basically 3 things. Public inquest, condolences sent to the family, and also psychosocial services urgently available for the family. None of these things were made possible, even though we have a very eloquent and very highly paid chief of police by the name of Fadi Dagera. If you spend time with him, will not hesitate to tell you that, hey, I'm African, I was born in Ivory Coast, and I was able to say, But, so, I don't go on that tangent, that's for another discussion. But the other reason is that in 2023, the RCMP put out allegations that some Chinese organizations were acting under the guidance of China. So the RCMP spread out these allegations without any proof, and it affected organizations here in Chinatown, Montreal. And I'm thinking of Chinese Family Services. And the board, and the people on the board of the Chinese Family Services, to save the organization that had to face cuts of amounting to millions of dollars, had to go and, like, how do you say that in English? Had to hypothéquer leur maison, had to mortgage. Okay, had to, I don't know, a lot of like community organizations where people on the board, and they're really on the board like they're about that life, to save the purpose of the organization that was servicing families, migrants, etc., etc. And this fight amounts to a lawsuit of about $4.9 million. And the only media that talks about it, with the angle of the people that are facing the impact of it, is the Rover, English media. So I want all of us to think about that. And also, days before us congregating together today, the city of Montreal kind of removed the permit for us to actually congregate and have this, the discussion that we're having right now, be accessible to many people. The people facing homelessness, the people in wheelchairs, the people passing by to go get the bubble tea, and this is an attack amongst many others. So y'all all got like potentially smartphones. You don't have to do it now, but I want y'all to at least give the praises due to the Chinatown, to its organizers, but also shame the authorities that are using their power to suppress narratives. And the talk that we're having about right now is all about reframing narratives. And I want to also salute the people that have made this space available. Why? Because right now, it is not possible to hold that type of conversation into black-led organizations right now. And I say it as a black man standing here, or sitting there, and because we're stuck doing galas, getting federal funding, and doing galas, and getting medals and galas and galas and galas. And some of us that have started the fight with Freddie Villanueva, for Freddie Villanueva's, I'm losing my words, for justice, for Freddie Villanueva, Honduran kid that lost his life at 18 years old in the park of Montreal North. There has been infighting amongst activists because of how power uses us and buys us out of the fight. And I sit here because also, I sit here, but I also sit with a feeling of having how do you say that? Échec. Failure. Because when Ronnie K died, people reached out to me and said, Ricardo, you have had all of that experience fighting police and so on and so on. Could you help bring that intelligence and knowledge to our communities that are facing that with Ronnie K? And I had to turn to these people and say, I don't think we've made much progress. We've kind of failed, and I hope that you don't repeat our failures. So that's my stance right now. I'm willing to live with the blowback of that. But to go with your question, I think that, and I think I kind of answered, with the death of Alain Magloire, with the death of Alain Magloire, Pierre Coriolan, Nicholas Gibbs, Sheffield Matthews, Mohamed Anas Benis, Kylian Registre, all of these people, and you've mentioned it, Ted, there was no justice for none of these people. there have been superficial type of advancement, like even the public inquest for Freddy Villanueva, it lasted years, and then there were, not filibustering, but there were delays because of very technical aspects, such as was the police officer, could he have been disarmed, and toute la discussion sur l'étui du policier. So now, with adding new technology to it, I can only imagine other technical aspects for which there would be absence of transparency from the forces. So the answer remains no. There has been no real progress, and now we're seeing elected officials come up to relatives of Abisai Cruz who died last year. It's already been a year. Like, it was in the spring. Spring, sorry. Okay, it hasn't been a year yet. Honduran man, just like Freddy Villanueva, was killed. It was filmed, and we're seeing elected officials go and approach the family and say, by the way, if you roll with us, we'll give our forces body cameras, as if that's a reward. But with the added knowledge and perception that you're sharing with us today, we know that it doesn't bring us closer to justice. And also there's no reciprocity in terms of when these images will be available and how they'll, you kind of said it all. So that's how I can answer your first question.
Wow, thanks for that. So I'll just say quickly, you know, the major group that's been lobbying for police body cameras in Montreal is the Police Brotherhood, the Fraternité des Policiers et Policières de Montréal. They've been lobbying very publicly for body cameras since 2019, maybe behind closed doors before then. And they're very honest about why they want body cameras. The first reason is that they want to have in their own video recordings of incidents to combat the video recordings that we make with our cameras and circulate online. Like, none of the videos that we circulate online, when we film police, it doesn't lead to consequences for the police, but it does fuel our movement, and it does discredit the police, and they deserve to be discredited. So the Police Brotherhood would like to have their own video camera. They will say sometimes that they want to have a more accurate representation of what happened, but you know, we cannot believe that they will simply just release the film and let all of us see exactly what happened. You know, for various reasons that Alec mentioned, even if they did so, it would be from the perspective of the police, it would be jumping around all these kinds of things. And the second thing is, if they had body cameras, it would be much more money for the police and many more police jobs, because the technology costs money, but then you have to hire a whole bunch of people to archive those films, to make those films available for the court, to punish poor people that the police arrest. So it's more jobs for the cops.
I read that book in 2 days. I urge you to go in and support the work that La Rue d'Orion has done into making that book accessible in French. But I like the fact that this book provides a space where there's an analysis of, there's a summary of the analysis of a crisis management firm that says that whenever there's a situation such as Floyd or big revolt and protests and so on, how do you deal with that? So they basically came up with categories, and these categories will be made up of the radicals. Like maybe Defund La Police folks are seen as radicals, demanding too much. The naive. Well, do you want to say it better than me? But that's okay.
Well, you're doing good.
Well, I'm struggling right now. You're trying to help me. But it's just that it's about like a page 134 or something. Like there's this breakdown, and at some point I was like, that's why I'm stuck in my life. I'm stuck being seen as a radical. What do I need to do? Shit, I need to wear a tie or something. I need to make better friends and like. So, but you get to kind of see where you position in your advocacy and activism, and then you're like, okay, and I'm still lingering with these thoughts. But I like the fact that the book pushes us to also see that it's not only about mobilizing, but also organizing, and then we can face some types of reprisals due to the sophistication of that organizing that we're trying to do, but we must keep on going forward. And part of that organizing is reframing the narrative. It's not about like, was he a good police officer? Mm-hmm. Did the violence escalate too quickly? Like, what about asking the question as to why was a police officer even there in the first place? Like, why were they the ones sent to answer that call, that distress? Like, what's happening with the police budget here in Montreal? Why is it hitting $1 billion? And the excuse that Montreal uses is that, oh, if we go on with body cameras, it'll cost us more, millions of dollars more. But what are you actually doing with the gazillion money that you have right now? That's pretty scary. A police force in the metropolis that has more than $826 million of budget. Fatih Daguerre is one of the highest paid public officials. Fatih Daguerre, the chief of police in Montreal. So there's an urgency to reframe narratives, and how do we use our collective intelligence to do so? So I think that's what the book, that's how the book lives with me right now. And also I like the foreword that you're doing in French, Ted. Ted signs the foreword and reminds us what protéger, servir actually stood for initially. A lot of us maybe have not had that information. And if you want to go on by saying, where does protect and serve, servir, protéger comes from? Because sometimes naively, as we protest, we're like, servir et protéger, but like, yeah. But, I mean, just say.
Honestly, I mean, it saddens me when I hear people at protests saying, the police are supposed to serve and protect, you're not supposed to kill us. And it's like, they were never supposed to serve and protect. That was a marketing slogan developed by the LAPD after a scandal in which the police got drunk and brutalized a bunch of people held in the city jail. It was an image problem. They came up with a new slogan that printed on cars, and now it's sort of viewed as that's what the police are for. Alec said very helpfully in an event yesterday that like the police used to be very much more honest about what their role was. Right. Now they sort of are supposed to be protecting everyone. Right. Maybe this is a good time to open it up. I'm sure you've got tons of questions for Alec and Ricardo. So if you got a question, hit us up.
Yeah, I have a quick question about the legality of the footage that we keep seeing on YouTube and how there's those big edits of people's worst drunk moments, homeless people being filmed, and of course that's footage that comes from the police, and how does it end up on YouTube with millions of views, and is it leaked by the police, is it through the legal system? I was just curious about that.
Maybe we'll take a couple of questions. Okay, you had a question.
I wanted to know about how you feel about AI. How do you feel about AI generated videos, like potentially getting into the hands of the police? Like, would they start to generate their own videos to because you said that they edit videos of body cams already. Like, would AI kind of instigate this further or something?
Grab one more question here. Talk show host.
Yeah, I was also wondering, obviously we all know we live in settler colonial states, that goes for the United States and Canada as well, obviously, where the laws will always be fundamentally unfair. But I guess that's where my question is, how do you see the role of the courts specifically? Because I know you do the impeachment of the courts, and I think we can all see it because if you've been in this city in the past year, you've been getting tear gas a lot more since there was that settlement on kettling that now police don't want to kettle anymore because of the 2012 settlement. So now they're just gassing the shit out of us. And so yeah, how do you see the work of the court in terms of non-reformist reform and trying to push things that are not body cameras reforms that empower and fund the police, but rather that take resources away from policing and carcerality? How does that intersect with the use of the court in you guys' view, if that makes sense?
So I don't know Canadian laws around this. In the United States, it's quite complicated. It really depends on who's releasing the video, and in many cases it could be illegal, but in some cases if a video is played in a court proceeding, then it becomes public. So it sort of depends. I don't know the laws here on that. I do think we should be very concerned about AI. I think the police are already using AI to summarize and analyze videos, but most importantly, they're using AI to predict stuff. I use the word predict, I guess, in quotes, because it's not actually a prediction. It's in order to provide a veneer of objective science on what are essentially political decisions, like which neighborhood am I going to deploy resources to, or which group of friends am I going to call a gang, or things like that. They're already using AI for that. And in a world where it's becoming easier and easier to generate sound and video and images, I think we should all be very afraid of that power in the hands of the police, who also have a certain power to declare what's a crime and who's guilty of a crime, and also they have very sophisticated forensic resources to manipulate video and to make it extremely hard for ordinary people to know what is true and what isn't. And that destruction of truth more broadly is a much more worrying thing than any particular lie. I want to say a couple other things. We try to pick our cases and tell the stories in our cases in ways that undermine and subvert those narratives. So, for example, I opened the book Propaganda, which I hope you'll get, and all the royalties are donated to an amazing charity that works with unhoused people against police surveillance. But the book starts with a group of children I'm representing in the United States who are suing sheriffs across the United States because in the US, millions of children are now no longer able to visit their parents who are in pretrial detention. Jails in the US stopped letting families have visits because the jail telecommunications industry, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry owned by private equity firms, figured out that if you stop people from visiting, they'll spend more money on calls and video visits. That's a term of propaganda. Obviously, it's not a visit. It's a video call. You don't, when you FaceTime your grandmother, you don't say I visited my grandmother. And so they give sheriffs a cut of the profit now if the sheriff gets rid of visits. So I'm representing a bunch of children across the United States, and we're suing to establish a constitutional right to hug their parents. Okay? And the children are also suing the companies and then the individual private equity billionaires who own these firms. It's a very interesting case, but what the case is I think hopefully we'll win in court because there should be a right to hold your mom's hand or hug your father or whatever it may be, to look into their eyes, to have a face-to-face conversation. That should be everyone's right. But really the cases are counter-propaganda cases. They are cases that are at a very deep level subverting the foundational mythology that the purpose of police and jails is to keep people safe. Because this decision is actually bad for everybody. It's bad for children, it's bad for these communities. It actually increases crime based on the studies that have been done, right? Even if you were to limit yourself to the police definition of crime, right? Which is only some crimes committed by some people and only looking at the narrow range of things that our society decides to call crime. But even if you look at that, it's bad for everybody. So it's a very powerful message around the United States now because people are thinking, if the government is ending this family visit to make money, how can I trust anything else the police and the sheriffs and the judges are saying? Because these people are doing this. And on top of that, all these parents are only in jail because they can't pay cash bail, which only exists as a for-profit system in the US and the Philippines. So these stories are very subversive, and so when we think about how to use the courts, we are thinking about how do we use these places of state power as places where maybe, let's say, some of the most marginalized children, so the first group of children representing is children in Flint, Michigan. You may have heard of the same children that were poisoned by the government's criminal behavior with lead, and et cetera. These children are suing a billionaire and the police. And how do we use the court case as a moment to force our society to have a very different kind of conversation about what the purpose of a jail is? And so we choose our cases in a way that we also think about as counter-propaganda interventions. And then I'll just say can I say one? Well, sorry, I'm rambling a lot, but I wanted to touch on something that you said. There is in certain other societies, like let's say when they roll out surveillance technology in Dubai, or Israel, or Qatar. So when they've rolled out very similar surveillance technology in some of these other societies, there isn't a need to frame it as some kind of liberal intervention. There's much more honesty about what's happening. So if you look at foreign coverage, whether it be in China or in Israel or in India or increasingly in the U.S. actually, because there's been a shift in the United States in the extent to which people in power think they have to convince low information liberals to go along with something. That's why Trump is now trying to rename the Department of Defense the Department of War, right? We used to have a Department of War. For the liberal era, they renamed it the Department of Defense to frame imperial violence as defensive, and now we're back to the Department of War, right? What's really, really important is that we not be confused and distracted by the labels that these systems are putting, because across different societies, the people in power are doing the same things, and by the way, it's the same global consulting firms and the same large multinational companies that are designing the National Indian Digital ID system, which the right-wing BJP party is now using as part of a huge plan to basically exclude Muslim people from civil society in India, right? They now have this system set up where they're going to be able to shut off with biometric, iris scans and other biometric data. They can shut anyone off from opening a bank account, having a phone, voting,